You were just telling me something that is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard, that you swam from Maui to Lanai.
Right.
And you're the only humans to ever do that.
I'm told I was the first person to swim from Maui to Lanai and back. The one way is a pretty famous swim race that's done every year.
You're the first person to do it.
The round
and
trip.
Go back. Fuck, dude. Why'd you do that?
How long you got?
It started when I was a boy. They told me I couldn't do it. What made you want to do that? It's a ridiculous proposition.
So I decided in, this is going to sound silly. I read a book in January of 2004 about this woman named Penny Dean, who still to this day holds the record for the fastest crossing of the Catalina Channel. So swimming from Catalina Island to San Pedro, you typically swim to Point Vicente. And she had done it in like 7 hours and 20 minutes. And I was like, that's amazing.
How far is that?
As a crow flies, it's 21 miles. With the currents, it's a little longer. And I was like, I really want to do this, but I got to learn how to swim first.
So that's 3 miles an hour swimming?
She is a phenom. Penny Dean had a stroke rate of 90 strokes per minute, which, that might not mean anything to someone who doesn't swim, but like to have a hand hit the water every, 2/3 of a second is a remarkable cadence. Yeah, I can't hold a cadence of that for 100 yards.
Wow. And she did it for 20 miles?
Yeah.
What a beast.
She's out of control. Yeah.
There's certain people like that, man, that freak me out.
I think marathon swimming might be one sport where if you just look at the numbers, I think women are better than men.
Well, there's that woman who swam from Cuba to the United States, right? She was the first person ever to do that.
Diana Nyad.
And didn't she do it like at a fairly advanced age?
Yeah. She's of course got an amazing pedigree of swimming, and this wasn't her first rodeo.
Right. Why do you think women are better than men at that?
Those of us that I'm not a member of this community anymore, but when I was, it was one of our favorite topics of discussion. I think opportunities or ideas that were put forth were higher pain tolerance, something about being, evolving to be able to give birth. Just means they can tolerate pain a lot higher. I think another thing I've heard is buoyancy. Women are naturally going to have more body fat, which provides insulation. When you do these swims, you're not allowed any wetsuits or aids of any sort. So
just shorts.
You're in a Speedo and a single latex cap, and that's it. And so if you can have a little, and so I think women's hips, because they're going to have more fat on their hips, it corrects one of the big buoyancy issues that we have in swimming. We didn't evolve to swim. We're horrible at it naturally because we swim like this. We drag our hips through the water. And if you think about the importance of aerodynamics in most of the things that we think about, whether it be archery or race car driving or cycling, in water it's that much more important because the density of water is, thousands of times greater than air. So swimming is just 100% about avoiding drag. Wow.
So, that totally makes sense. I just have been fascinated forever with people that are capable of pushing their brain to do things that other people just don't think are possible, like a Bigfoot 200 race or like any of those things. But the swim one is particularly crazy because you can't stop.
Right.
Like if you're running an ultra marathon and you just want to sit down for a couple minutes and just take a break, you can do that. But if you're swimming, there's not a damn thing you can do.
You could tread water is about as good as it gets. But you can't touch the boat or the kayak or it's an immediate disqualification.
Oh, God. That's so crazy, man. That is such a... Wow. So you heard about this woman doing it, and that's what...
I read this book, and I was like, I really want to do this. At the time, I was actually in my residency in Baltimore, and I was like, I really want to do this, and I'm going to have to learn how to swim to do it. So I started taking swimming lessons, and then, to make a very long story short, basically by about the summer of 2005, I entered my first swim race, which was a 2-mile swim race in Lake Reston, Virginia. And I did it. And I was like, oh my God, I just swam 2 miles in the open water. It was hard, but I was like, okay, that's the proof of concept. Now you just got to figure out how to make it 20, 25 miles. And so I just, went completely psycho and ratcheted up the training. And and then in October of 2005, I did my first Catalina swim.
Wow. That's got to be a pretty good feeling, though, when you're done, that you are capable of pushing yourself to what most people think is an impossible distance.
Yeah. I mean, people, you asked a moment ago, why do you do this? I would say that in life, velocity means very little. Acceleration means everything. So what do I mean by that, right? Like if you're going 650 miles an hour in an airplane, you don't actually feel it. Mm-hmm. You only feel when speed changes.
Right.
So I've always had this theory that emotionally that's also true. Like happiness is only interesting when it's juxtaposed with sadness. And so the feeling of crawling on the shore after you've been swimming for 12 to 14 hours is amazing. But what makes it especially amazing is that 6 hours earlier, you thought you were going to die. So you start these swims in the middle of the night to avoid the shipping traffic. So that first swim, boat drops you off at Catalina Island. It's midnight. That's a darkness you can't imagine. Like you can't even see LA from Catalina. You have to swim for 6 hours before you even see the lights of Los Angeles.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you see?
The stars and the like bioluminescent organisms in the water.
Whoa.
Which is incredible. I mean, that's worth the price of admission. So every time your hand comes through the water, you're pulling and ripping these little things and you're seeing the sparks. And you can't tell where the water ends and the sky starts. In other words, the stars and the bioluminescence looks like one cylinder.
Wow.
So for the first few hours, that's cool. But then, on my first swim, the water was incredibly rough. I had only swum in the ocean for 2 weeks before the swim. I did all my training in a swimming pool, in a lake on the East Coast. So now I wasn't used to how to keep the salt water out of my mouth.
Right.
So then I was like puking my guts out, and then
while you were swimming, you're puking your guts out?
Yeah.
How does that work?
You just stop and puke, and then keep swimming.
Wow.
And then. But then my tongue started to get really swollen from the salt water. Because again, as I would learn later on, I would go on to do many more of these swims. But what I learned is the importance of spitting the water out of your mouth very quickly. So in a freshwater pool or lake, you get away with more. But in the ocean, you swallow that salt water, you're going to get sick as hell. So all this stuff's going on. So by 5 a.m, you've been swimming for 5 hours, you're getting cold, frankly, just physiologically, like your cortisol levels are at a nadir. You feel horrible. It's like, it's a really bad feeling. And you're not even halfway there. And it's like, you don't know if you can do it and blah, 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 blah. Well, if 6 hours later, you're now crawling out of the water, feeling like you've done this amazing thing, that's emotional acceleration. That's like the greatest contrast.
I know what you're saying. I've never experienced that, but I was explaining the other day to a friend of mine about this camping trip that we went on in Montana when it was like 9 degrees outside. It was freezing cold. We stayed out there for 5-6 days. And then when we finally got to a hotel room, I took a shower, and it was the most amazing shower I've ever experienced in my life. And that's a small thing.
Right, no, but you take a shower every day, and it's like a big deal. But when you do it in that setting, or think about the meal you've had if you've been in a similar situation,
or starving or lost at sea.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. So now that you've done, how many of these have you done? These crazy swim races, or swim? What would you call them?
Several. Yeah. Usually these major ones are not races. You're on your own. You go to the federation that oversees that body of water, and you say, hey, I want to do this. And then you go through all the channels to do it. Like they have to have an observer there, and you follow these official rules.
So that you can be registered as someone who's actually completed it.
Right. And someone's there to make sure you did it correctly. I don't know. I've probably done all in probably like a dozen of these, but probably like 6 of them really long ones.
What's the longest?
Well, that's a good question.
What is the Maui one was 20 miles there and back, so 40 miles total?
No. It's
20 total.
The Maui Channel is a 10-mile channel, so round trip is 20. The bigger question is time in the water, because you rarely get to swim these in a straight line. So the Maui Lanai one, I wanted to go Maui, Lanai, Molokai, Maui to do the triangle. Mm-hmm. And that would have been 30 miles as a crow flies. But we just, boat captain wasn't willing to do it at night because of the tiger sharks. And during the daytime, we couldn't physiologically figure out how one could suffer against the wind, because the wind gets so brutal in the middle of the day. So even the one that I did, which was just the there and back, I ended up swimming for 12 hours because on the first way crossing where there was no wind took me 4 hours. And then it took 8 hours to get back because I was swimming like the hypotenuse of a triangle, right? Like the current's going this way, so I had to swim this way just to go in a straight line. And I still couldn't. I almost missed Maui.
Jesus Christ.
So I almost got swept out to Molokai just because the current was about 1.7 knots, which is about as fast as I can swim, maybe 2 knots.
Fuck. That is a ridiculous thing, man. Why are you doing this? This is maniacal.
Well, I don't do it anymore.
Right.
I mean, it was certainly, it was an amazing season of my life, but I think once my daughter was born, which was 10 years ago this summer, that's when I only probably did 2 of these after she was born, because then the training just got so, you got to live in the water if you want to do this sport. Like you got to, including the winter, even in San Diego where I live, it's still, 55 degrees in the water, and you're going to spend 3-4 hours a day in the water, freezing, it's just, so I was like, I just don't have the drive to spend 25 hours a week swimming.